There is no need to sign in. You can if you wanted to, but you don't have to. That's for sure.
Go back.
If you want your name spelled right, yeah, that helps. Good evening, everybody. My name is Susan Bransfield. I'm first Selectwoman, and I'm going to start with the legal notice of the public hearing of the Board of Selectmen, Wednesday, February 21, 2018, at 7 p.m. in the Portland Library, Mary Flood Room, 20 Freestone Avenue, Portland, Connecticut. The Board of Selectmen of the Town of Portland, Connecticut will hold a public hearing on Wednesday, February 21, 2018 at 7 p.m. at the Portland Library, Mary Flood Room, 20 Freestone Avenue, Portland, Connecticut, to obtain public comments and questions regarding the proposed purchase of properties located at 222, 230, and 248 Brownstone Avenue, Portland, Connecticut, and an appropriation and bond authorization of $410,000 to finance the purchase. And this was dated at Portland, Connecticut, the 8th day of February 2018. Attest Susan Bransfield, First Select Board. There may be a few more people joining us, so I will go through some of the written communications that we have received over, in some cases, the years, and in some cases, the last few days. This application was number 17-11, which was referred to the Planning and Zoning Commission. And the Planning and Zoning Commission said that the Town of Portland plans to redevelop the site for possible use as a visitor center, museum, waterfront restaurant, and additional parking for the riverfront parks, as well as the town-owned quarry. And it was the application of the Town of Portland, and they approved this application. So the action of buying land always goes to the Planning and Zoning Commission under State Law 8-24. So it has been approved unanimously by the Planning and Zoning Commission. The Economic Development Commission submitted a advisory opinion, and they will be summarizing that tonight. Our chairman, Owen Gild, is here, so he will go over that a little bit later. The recommendation is the Economic Development Commission encourages Portland citizens to approve this purchase authorization so the Board of Selectmen can move forward with the town's riverfront development. The Middlesex County Chamber of Commerce wrote, "I'm writing today to offer support of the Middlesex County Chamber of Commerce for Town of Portland's proposed purchase of properties located on Brownstone Avenue and the appropriation and bond authorization of the $410,000 to finance the purchase. These properties have been vacant and abandoned for over 10 years, and there's currently no path to a viable commercial or other productive use for them. A municipal purchase of these properties would allow for a comprehensive cleanup of the area and the best opportunity for economic development in a critical section of town. Portland's riverfront has experienced a resurgence in recent years as a result of sound management, entrepreneurial spirit and ambition, and dedicated residents. The Brownstone Exploration and Discovery Park, which is a major local employer and an important regional tourist destination, has opened the corridor and will help facilitate additional economic activity in the area. The Middlesex County Chamber of Commerce believes that a municipal purchase of the properties in question will lead to them becoming a fully integrated part of Portland's overall riverfront strategy and increased economic development in the town of Portland and Middlesex County. Thank you for the opportunity to weigh in on this important topic. The Chamber looks forward to being a constructive partner as this process moves forward." And it's signed Larry McHugh, President, Middlesex County Chamber. The next letter is from Robert Heron. "I'm sorry I'm not able to make the public hearing due to another commitment. I am in support of the Board of Selectmen purchasing the properties along Brownstone Avenue that will be discussed Wednesday evening. I'm writing as a Portland resident, taxpayer, and voter for over 15 years, and will attend the 228 meeting and vote yes to support purchase. While there are many reasons, I'll focus on three. One, opportunity, control, and future value. Current owners have been unable to find a private buyer for this polluted property. However, our town can purchase it and receive initial remediation grants over what our costs to purchase the property will be, which is he says $340,000, it's actually a $385,000 purchase plus closing costs. The value of this improved property after remediation should then be worth more than the money we paid for it originally. Portland will then own and control the future of a remediated parcel along the river that could be used for an improved commercial use. Number two, Portland's present and future. The majority of voters have discerned, supported, or voted in favor in recent years to the future improvements of our town. Excuse me, whether it was support for Riverfront Park, the Discovery Park, the Airline Trail development, our future Route 17 park, as well as Brainerd Place development. Portland needs to continue to be forward-thinking. This seems prudent and timely first step toward final improvement of the current industrial eyesore that will again pay positive dividends to our town's future. And number three, trust. Through the Board of Selectmen, Portland has been very deliberate and thoughtful with the use of public monies to improve our town's mix of property and infrastructure. I empathize with other taxpayers who would rather not bond any new projects, or specifically this project, in favor of something else. However, I trust our Planning and Zoning Commission that voted unanimously for the plan, the new Board of Selectmen members, and you, our elected officials, would not bring the project to this point unless you trusted the outcome would be beneficial in the long run. So our town process to arrive at this point is a major reason why I'll be supporting the bonding issue for Portland's future. Best regards, Bob Herron, Portland, Connecticut. Steve Krusberg, excuse me. I'm uncertain as to whether I'll be able to attend, so I'm writing this. I'm totally in favor of the purchasing of properties along Brownstone Avenue that will be discussed at the 221 meeting. Current owners have been unable to sell the property. However, if the town purchases it, remediation grants can be used to clean up the property. The town will then be able to attract commercial development at this location. This can not only beautify the area, but augment activities at the riverfront and exploratory parks in the immediate area. I believe this will be an asset. I plan to vote yes at the 228 meeting. Next is from Tom and Marilyn White, Indian Hill Avenue. We approve of the purchase of 5.2 acres of riverfront land on Brownstone Avenue for the following reasons. Portland has been successful in the purchase and lease of properties such as the quarries. We may be one of the few towns in the area to do this so well. 2, without the town's purchase and use of committed grant for cleanup of the site, the land may lie unused for many years to come. 3, Glastonbury is a fine example of publicly redeveloping its riverfront and giving access to its citizens. 4, another example of a successful public and private partnership is Harbor Park and the Canoe Club restaurant owned by the city of Middletown and leased to preserve the riverfront. 5, with the state's economically unstable budgets over the next 2 to 5 years, Portland has an excellent opportunity to not only purchase and clean up a riverfront site, but, like the use of the quarries, turn it into a money-making proposition for our town. We need this added money for the future of our citizens in education pursuits and overall welfare of our town. The development of the old Elmcrest site along this site will showcase Portland as a place to live and visit. And lastly, let us remember that we're not making any more riverfront property. This is a very unique opportunity to control the site for our town. We thank the Board of Selectmen for their affirmative action to move forward with purchasing the land and urge all of Portland's citizens to vote in favor of the purchase. The next is Kathy Herron, 23 Old Homestead Village in Portland. I would like to express my support for Portland purchasing this 5 acres of riverfront property adjacent to the Riverfront Park on Brownstone Avenue. I believe this is a chance for Portland to gain control of more of its riverfront with possible use by the public if there is a restaurant, museum, or other facilities open to Portland residents and the general public. I also believe it's an opportunity to clean up contamination on that property with the cost being funded by a state grant. I think it would be a mistake to pass up this opportunity. Kathy Herron. And then in 2016, I'm not going to read the entire letter, but the Jonah Center for Earth and Art wrote on behalf of its board of directors in support of the acquisition of the 5.2 acres of the riverfront property. And they conclude that they're confident that if the town does proceed to acquire the 5.28 acres of riverfront property, future generations for decades and even centuries will have reason to be grateful for vision and stewardship. And then when we applied for the grants, both in 2014 and again in 2016 when we applied for the cleanup grant, we used letters from our state representative Carpino, who wrote, currently the property in question is an abandoned petroleum tank farm. Thus, a much needed redevelopment plan would go a long way toward revitalizing our community. The Brownfields project is vital because it identifies a contaminated area and makes it useful again. In doing so, the project will advance our economy and make our part of the state a better place to live. The Brownfields assessment grant, which we did receive, as well as the cleanup grant, would serve as the cornerstone not only for the redevelopment of the property, but for economic betterment of our entire community. It is for these reasons that I offer my enthusiastic support for this grant, and this was signed by Representative Christy Carpino. Also in 2014, I write in strong support of Portland's application for the Brownfields Assessment Grant for the 3 properties along Brownstone Avenue next to the Connecticut River. The grant money is critical for the region because it will expand development opportunities through both job creation and tourism while preserving the beauty and ecology of the area. The Portland Brownstone Quarries on the National Register of Historic Places operate as Discovery Park, a local asset that draws many visitors to Portland for outdoor sporting activities throughout the seasons. The nearby properties, once cleaned and safe for use, will make an ideal visitor center and also provide space for a waterfront restaurant and additional parking for the park and the village center. Grant money for the assessment will allow this project to progress forward much more quickly, as Portland will then be able to plan for restoration. I look forward to the development of this area into an even more attractive tourist destination that will greatly benefit the region and the state of Connecticut. And this was signed by Art Linares, our state senator. And then there was another letter back in 2014. I won't read the entire letter because it's another letter in support from then the Middlesex County Chamber of Commerce, reiterating its support for the grant and for Portland's cleanup. And we also received a letter in support of the grants that we did receive from the Lower Connecticut River Valley Council of Governments. And in summary, the approval of Portland's application for Brownfields grant is a major first step in turning these properties from a detraction into an asset to the region. Please let us know if there's any way the Council of Governments and its staff can assist in your efforts going forward. So those were some of the letters. If anyone has further letters, we'll certainly accept them, as well as written comments tonight. And then in addition, we have some information that Ty and Bond, Amy Valancourt from Ty and Bond, is going to give us a brief presentation on the topic. And Amy Valancourt is a licensed environmental professional. She works for Ty and Bond and has done many, many of these cleanup projects throughout the state. We also have with us tonight Bruce Chudwick. Bruce is in the front. He is our attorney from Shipman and Goodwin that assists the town whenever it takes out any dollars in terms of bonds. So there's a few chairs left. Mike, are there any more chairs in the room? Feel free to come in and have a seat, and I'll turn it over to Amy.
If you're not afraid of the attention, you can certainly come up here with me. This is amazing, I have to say. All the
Can everyone
faces.
hear? Can everyone hear? Okay.
Can you? All right, good. Okay, so again, extremely happy with the participation tonight. I have been in this room many times for this project, and this is the most people we've had in here. So again, thank you so much for coming out tonight. So,
Yes, you will have a chance, Mr. Kanata?
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
certainly.
So the project we're talking about involves prime waterfront real estate that could not get developer or purchaser interest because of contamination. The site's adjacent to the Brownstone Discovery Park and the town-owned Riverfront Park. The site is blighted, abandoned, surrounded by chain link fence with no trespassing signs, but it's still continually vandalized. So since 2001, the town's been planning for the redevelopment reuse of Brownstone Ave for the economic and community development in Portland. They started with the Portland Downtown Inquiries Master Plan in 2001. They completed a strategic market and feasibility study in 2004. They developed the Brownstone Quorum, a nonprofit community organization made up of residents, activists, business owners, and town officials. And in 2007, along with the development of the parks, they adopted a riverfront overlay for the area, which encourages commercial, recreational, and all other water-related uses that would promote public access along the river. Slide on the background on the process. So the town retained time bond in 2013 to complete a Phase 1 environmental site assessment for the property, where we identified areas of concern, environmental concern. We presented the findings at a Selectmen meeting. The town applied for a DECD Brownfield Assessment Grant in 2014, and they were awarded the grant for $200,000 to complete the assessment of these properties. The project was publicly bid and time bond was awarded. We presented our assessment scope, the process by which we would assess the property, at the Selectmen's meeting. So then from 2015 through 2016, we completed those site assessments, Phase 2 and Phase 3 environmental site assessments, where we did all kinds of soil and groundwater samples to figure out what was going on and put a cost estimate on the cleanup. So we developed a cleanup plan for the site to bring it to a commercial standard in accordance with DEP regulations. And after each investigation, we would present at the Selectmen meetings our findings. DECD had encouraged the town to apply for a brownfields cleanup grant due to the economic and community development potential of this project, not only for the town, but the region overall. And this is the town gaining control of a large riverfront property with a deep water dock next to a national landmark, with the potential for the town to get revenues through lease or sale once cleaned up. So it's important to note here that the proposed reuses in the grant are just potential options. These are not set in stone. It's up to the public to decide the highest, best use and what those options are. So this is all for economic and community development, so it falls back on the community. And that is going to be part of our discussion tonight. But the bottom line is that only the town can apply for the cleanup grant, and the cleanup grant can only be used if the town owns the property. So once the town was awarded the grant, the Board of Selectmen decided to begin negotiations on a purchase price. And the original listing price was $899,000. So the Board of Selectmen's initial bid was $899,000 minus the remediation costs. And it started the negotiation from there. And recently they settled on the price of $385,000. So let's talk about the remedial action plan. starting with the abatement demolition costs. So this is primarily related to the removal of the existing bulk storage petroleum tanks. These are massive tanks. They need to be dismantled. Although the metal can be recycled, dismantling the tanks is labor intensive. We're actually currently seeing if there's any interest from any active petroleum terminals that may want to take this off your hands, take the tanks themselves. So the remedial action plan for soil for the project includes excavation of petroleum impacted soil. So as you see on the map, all the red hatched areas, that's where we have to remove soil. And some we go off site, and we're looking at Clean Earth, which is in Plainville, Connecticut. We're not trying to, we're trying to save on costs and get it accepted locally. And then we have capping of soils, remaining impacted soils on site through the use of engineered controls and implementation of an environmental land use restriction. And I'm going to talk more about that. Now, with regard to the groundwater for this property, the only thing we detected in groundwater was petroleum hydrocarbons related to oil. But once the source in the soil is removed or environmentally isolated so that precipitation is not bringing the oil contamination down to the groundwater impacts will naturally attenuate through biologic activity and dilution. Also, bugs tend to love the petroleum hydrocarbons. They use them as an energy source, so they're easily broken down. So we can let the residual petroleum impacts in groundwater naturally attenuate while we monitor them. Now, with the capping of soil, there's two things we have to work with. There are soils where the petroleum is leachable, right? It could leach out and get into the groundwater. And those soils need to be removed or environmentally isolated so the precipitation cannot come in contact with them. And that is done through either a building or an impermeable cap, an engineered cap. And then we have widespread surface contamination. Again, some of these widespread areas that are red hatched. So with the surface contamination, what we worry about is direct exposure to humans in direct contact. And so these soils either have to be removed or rendered inaccessible so nobody could come into contact with them. And under DEP regulations, rendering inaccessible can mean 2 feet of clean fill and asphalt on top. Or you can have 4 feet of clean fill if you're not topping it off with asphalt. So as you can see, the final remedial plan will be closely tied to the reuse and the redevelopment of the site. So basically, if you want open space, we dig more and we either dispose off-site or we cap elsewhere on the property. Less parking, less building requires more action with regard to moving soils around on or off-site. Also, what comes into play is the floodplain boundary, which I will talk about more in my presentation. Now, with all that said, you may decide to buy the property, use the grant, remediate the property, get the property value right side up, and you may want to flip it right to a developer, which is a feasible option. The property cleaned up could probably get $1 million asking price or more. However, you would be giving up control of the property and possibly public access to the river. And your income from the property would likely be limited to that one transaction. On the other side, you can own and lease, having more control, long-term ownership of the real estate, and annual lease income. You can start with remediation and redevelopment on a single parcel right away if you feel you need to have income generation while you're performing the rest of the remediation. You could sell off a parcel if you wanted to. That's up to you. But the bottom line is nothing will get done on these properties if you don't have town involvement. And although DEP could get involved on this site with regard to a couple areas where petroleum contamination was found to be high, There's no real mechanism where DEP will come in and require the estate to clean up the property unless there was something like impacting potable wells, people drinking their water wells, or oil floating on the Connecticut River, and we don't have either of those. So some of the contamination actually found on the 2 lower lots probably predate environmental regulations. What DEP has agreed to is giving the town liability protection under the Brownfields program, which protects the town from third-party lawsuits, chasing any contamination that's migrated off-site, or having to conduct additional remediation in the future if state regulations change. If you decide to sell the properties, that liability protection passes with the properties to a new purchaser or developer. So, let me go back. So in order to apply for brownfield grant funds, you need to indicate a potential for future use on your application. I do have to go forward. Sufficient parking for Brownstone Discovery Park and the Riverfront Park during events has been an issue. The grant round for assessment was specifically for historic brownfield, so naturally this project with the adjacent landmark and the quarries made sense. The proposed visitor center and Brownstone Museum was a nice touch to demonstrate Portland's rich heritage, but this can be included in the project in so many other ways and doesn't even have to be a building per se. Furthermore, the waterfront restaurant that was in the application also made sense because of the adjacent parks and the amazing views. However, again, with all that said, it's up to the town to decide the highest best use of the site. DECD just wants to see economic and community development result from the dollars they've invested. So here are some things to consider about the potential redevelopment. The site is in a 100-year floodplain. And so looking at this map here, the magenta line is the 100-year floodplain. The green areas are 500-year. And so you can see the bottom parcel is in the 100-year floodplain. The middle parcel has a little more than a third. You know, there's maybe a quarter that's not in the floodplain. And then the upper piece has a good chunk that's not in the 100-year floodplain. So it's not that you can't build in a floodplain, but it requires higher costs for construction, mitigation, and permitting. This all ties into my remediation plan too. If we fill a portion of the floodplain that raises the grade, we need to compensate for the flood water stored somewhere else on the site. We're working through this right now in Middletown with development of the community boathouse. So that's all in a floodplain. We have to find flood storage somewhere else. And with regard to the potential waterfront restaurant, it can be built along the water. It has to be raised. It could be on a platform and raised out of the floodplain. So the site is within a natural diversity database area, meaning that there are listed endangered species, critical habitats, species of concern, and additional evaluation would be needed to identify if protective measures are needed with development. The Buckeye Pipeline also runs along Brownstone Ave and crosses the northern parcel and connects to the tanks. So the pipeline will need to be removed by Buckeye. And then lastly, the future use of the deep water dock on the site may require Army Corps or Office of Long Island Sound and Coast Guard coordination. The Army Corps and DEP would require a permit for dock repairs or replacement. And then the rest of my slides are really just to give you some glimpse at the information and sort of the feel for the site that we gathered through our assessment. So this photo here is actually an 1889 hand-drawn Sanborn map of the site. And so it was quarry back in the day, and our site was the stone yard. It's where they did the cutting. It's where they loaded the brownstone on the barges. This is a quintessential, postcard of the brownstone activities, but this is the rail line, and this is the image of running along our site. Then we have this great photograph. I can't tell you the day, and I can't even really reference, but I think the house at the end on the far left is the office, which, if you go back to this photo, is the small building right across from where it denotes Buckeye Pipeline, or the property boundary between the northern property and the middle. So it's pretty neat to see this sort of image and what it is today. And then here, 1924, still brownstone quarry, two separate ones, two separate companies. In 1963, it all changed over. Here we have bulk storage petroleum on the northern parcel. We also have auto repair. That building, the garage that's there on the corner of the parcel, that used to be auto repair. And then the middle parcel had 6 gasoline bulk storage tanks, and the lower one did not. It was just vacant. So here's some images. I'm probably the only one in this room, maybe not, that has gotten to the other side of the fence, and the other side of the fence, and the other side of that fence, and actually got to the river. So here we have the dock. DEP was interested in this dock. They had interest in helping, identify some grants that may help bring this back to life. So my hazardous building materials guys had to trek to the top of the tanks to see if there were any issues up there. And while they were up there, they snapped this picture. I loved it. This is the view looking northeast. So this is the other side of the 248 property. You see the retaining wall, and you're looking towards the former Coast Guard property. If the trees weren't there, the view is fantastic. Just even that little shrubbery there. It's very overgrown, very overgrown. So one thing I was shocked about, and I walked down this end with my coastal expert, and we were commenting on the brownstone and how stacked it was, and stacked right into the water. One of the things that came to mind for me was repositioning that to be steps going down, or big long rows where people could sit along on these brownstone formations on the water. Again, this is the entire riverbank along all 3 properties. So there's even a sort of bulkhead put in to kind of protect the dock over on that end. Here's some of the, Mary help me out, dolphin. Yeah, I'm learning new stuff every day. It's amazing. I've been doing this for 22 years, and I learn something new every time. Okay, so again, right down to the water. That's how it's stacked in some places. And that's it. That was my presentation.
Thank you, Amy.
You're welcome.
So you'll be here to answer any
Absolutely.
questions. Could I have a seat? I don't know whether we need, Mary, did you want to speak? Yeah, go ahead. From the Economic Development Department?
Mary Dickerson with Economic Development for the Town of Portland. And what I wanted to do was just answer a couple of questions that I've gotten. There were some fears that this was a Superfund site. And so what I want to do is just allay those fears. And the way that the EPA determines a Superfund site is that the property has been contaminated by hazardous waste and identified by the EPA as a candidate for cleanup because it poses an imminent risk to human health or the environment. This is not a Superfund site. There is contamination on the site, and that is preventing development of the site. So I have worked in one capacity or another in economic development for the town since 2007. So during that time, I have received only 3 inquiries on this property, and they came between 2009 and 2015. One of them was for the outdoor open storage of different types of industrial equipment. So it was used industrial equipment outdoor storage, so basically a storage yard. They would do no cleanup, they would put no money into developing the property, they would just put new gates and new locks on, and they would use that as it sits for outdoor storage. Be aware that inventory is not taxable as personal property. So the only thing that we would get from it would be the current property tax. The second use that we received a call for was to use those tanks to store waste, oil, and chemicals. And what this company did was they would go around and take these materials that other communities did not want, and they would put them in those tanks and store them there until they found a permanent place for them. And then the third person that contacted me was a speculator that heard the town was interested and wanted to know if it was possible for him to buy it and then to sell it to the town. So in 9 years, those were the three options that we had. Having done some research over the last 3 years, this really presents a unique opportunity for all of us. There is a good history and a good study that was done on property tax revenue impact for sites that are remediated through the brownfields process. So not only will this property value increase by the remediation, but neighboring properties within a 2-mile radius increase in value between 5 and 15%. So you look at the surrounding areas, you'll see an increase in property value for those properties in that area as well. So it's going to help the neighborhood overall. I think it's also important, a lot of people were very concerned that if the town takes this on, there's some liability. And as Amy said, when the town takes a grant and remediates a property as a brownfield, they get protection against future suits. So really our choice here is, do we leave the property to an investor who's not going to get that grant, who's going to come in and utilize it for an allowed industrial use, but uses that are not going to do anything to clean up the site, and so they're not going to raise the tax revenue for the town. The current assessment on the property is based on its contaminated condition. So anyone that purchases that property is not going to be paying more tax revenue to us than what we're getting now, because they're going to leave that property in a contaminated state. So I really just wanted to make sure that I addressed the issues. Some people were very concerned that we have a Superfund site that no one's been addressing and it's a danger and people are using that area. There's a big difference between a brownfield and a Superfund site. So a brownfield site is a site that cannot be developed because of the contamination, and so the uses that come in would be substandard to what the property could be, where a Superfund site does pose an imminent risk, and that is not this property. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
What I typically do, just so that we can keep some order for the meeting, is we will start with this front row right here, and I see Mr. Riz has raised his hand.
Well, two questions. One is,
Could you identify yourself,
Terry
please?
Rizzo, 7 McDonald Drive, Portland.
Yep.
How high do you have to build above 100-year floodplain?
It would depend on, as Amy said, how much fill they do. So at the time that they remediate that property, they can change the current height. So it would depend on how they are able to change that height and where that 100-year and 500-year flood line would move.
So the second part of the question is, if they're capping and covering, how does that allow you to dig into it to put a foundation for the restaurant or any pilings that you're going to need?
Okay, and as Amy said before as well, when that plan is put in place, the remediation plan takes into consideration those foundations. So they would look at where that building is going to go, and the remediation would take that into account and remediate down to a level that they would need to do to put in proper footings or foundations.
Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, come on.
Yes, good question. So certainly when we're doing our remediation plan, we look for where buildings are going. Now, when we're capping with the building, we don't need to do clean fill or anything. The building goes over it, it's covered. My goal is, what utilities do you need for your building and where are they going? Because I got to clean that up and I got to move it. So when you have future utility repairs or your guys are working on something, that area is clean. So those are the little nuances on how I have to tie my remediation into your development. So with a building, could just be put over it, right?
So what is the final designation of the property after remediation to this level? Is it
So-
still a brownfield?
Yeah, so environmental land use restriction. No, it's not necessarily a brownfield, right? It's a remediated property. So an environmental land use restriction goes on the deed. The first thing that it says is you cannot do residential here, unless you want to go back and clean it up to a residential standard, right? We're cleaning it up to a commercial standard. Then, in the areas that we did cap, we did put a building or we covered with a parking lot, it says, here is where we capped with an engineered control, you cannot dig here. If you need to dig here, you need to release the environmental land use restriction to do the digging. So that's why it's important to know what the development is so that I can make sure anywhere you do have to dig for utility repair or whatever, we've moved the soil from that area.
Anything else? Yeah, we're getting to the third row and after the first row. Anybody else in the first row? Well, I think Mr. Petzold's considered the first row here, so.
I just have a question. You mentioned the valuation. What is the annual taxes that we collect on that every year? Property.
The taxes for 2017 on 222 Brownstone Avenue were $2,491. On 230 Brownstone Avenue, they were $2,370. And on 248 Brownstone Avenue, the tax on the property and the tanks that are not currently being used, the outbuilding that's there in the garage, were $11,822. So the total taxes on the three properties that were received were $16,683.
Thank
Mm-hmm.
you.
Have they been paid to date?
Yes.
Yes,
They
the
are
taxes
all-
are
yeah.
current. The estate has been
Yes.
very good. They've been current.
Yep. Anybody else in the second row?
That was my question.
Yes, they are current, and they have not owed the town taxes. Good question. It is in an estate. It used to be owned, some of you may have known John Belletti. He ran Connecticut Tar and Asphalt, and he was throughout the state. Joyce knows who he was, and I knew John. John died very suddenly, without too many plans for how the business would continue. So it has been in an estate since his passing. The next row, Mr. Canada. How are you?
Michael Canada.
Would you like to come to the podium? You don't have to, but you may.
I live at 218 Main Street, Portland. My name is Michael Canada. I live at 218 Main Street, Portland, Connecticut. I lived there for 50 years, okay? I swam in both quarries that are on Main Street in Middletown, in Portland. You could go down Main Street, Portland, you wouldn't even know the quarries are there. I jumped every wall out down there, okay? Me and a couple other guys. We had Alamo, Parachute, God Save Me, you name it. Okay, we had all the names of everything, okay? Now, when I was a kid, we would go down there, we'd go swimming. Okay, now you're talking 40, 50 years ago. I go down there now because I could walk from my house and I could go in my backyard and I got a quarry there. So if I want to commit suicide, I could jump in, okay? I don't see anybody down the quarry. I don't see anybody swimming. I don't see anybody with canoes. I don't see nothing, okay? Nobody goes down there. Why did we buy the quarries? What Portland is scared that they were going to move the quarries? Right?
Why do you say there's no one
There's nobody down there. I'm telling you right now,
in the winter?
okay? In the winter or summer. And I'll tell you something right now. If I had a kid, I would never bring a kid down there swimming because you got oil tanks around. Okay? I could smell oil from my house. Now, if it's all, okay, contaminated, like they say it is, why are you going to build down there? You're going to put tar over this contamination now or whatever you're going to do? Now, I was walking down there yesterday, and I walked down to, there's 5 tanks on the side that you're looking at, okay, to buy.
Right.
And then there might be 40 or 50 tanks on this side. And I don't know if these people know it, them tanks blew up about 40 years ago. And we thought that we were getting bombed. And it came this close to melting the bridge. Now, if you start building down there, just say you build down there, you know, these terrorists now, they're shooting people and stuff like that. Pretty soon they're going to be blowing up tanks and stuff like that. You're going to get, well, another thing too, I fish the river, okay? And you could even fish it today. The first thing you do is you put a rag in your pocket, okay? Then you go down there with your fishing rod, You take the rag out, you put it on your line, and then you could reel it in, and you take the grease and the oil and everything off. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, that was 40 years ago, and it's still here today. So that all has to be in the river now. Okay? It's all contaminated, okay, like you say. They're gonna dig it up. They ain't gonna dig up nothing. They're not even gonna fix nothing. It's gonna cost you money. You're gonna go down there and buy some land when it's contaminated? I don't think so. Now, what I'm saying is, I think Portland, something has to be done here. I don't know what it is, but we gotta get rid of some people that are running the town. I'm telling you right now, we need a big shakeup, because they don't know what they're doing. You don't move a town hall that's on Main Street and put it in a side street. You buy what's around there, and you put the town hall on Main Street, and when you wanna go to the town hall, you go to Main Street. You don't go to some side road. Okay?
Yep, okay. I appreciate
What else?
appreciate your comments.
I just tell
Thank
you that now, okay, nobody swims down the quarry now. I'm telling you right now. Nobody goes down the, why we buy the quarries? What, $1 million, $1 million, $2 million for the quarries? For why? What do we do? They got a hose down there where you could get a little thing and go down?
Thank you.
Watch out, Portland. We need a shakeup, and I mean, we need a shakeup. And my name's 218 Main Street, Portland, Connecticut. Okay, and I lived there for 50 years,
Thank you.
and it sucks.
Anybody else in that row? That Mr. Canado is sitting? Linda?
I figured I'll use a mic too, why not, you know? Good. Although I do have a loud voice, so I probably don't need it. Of course, I need some reading glasses too. My name's Linda Purple. I live in, here in Portland, 3 Summercrest Drive, the Bartlett Hill community. And I did read the River East article about the land purchase near the Brownstone Quarry. The article says 410, but really it's, I guess, 385, excluding the taxes and closing costs, rather.
Yes.
But I have 2 main concerns personally, both financial and environmental.
Can you use the mic?
Oh, is it off?
It's just not picking up, I don't think.
I'm tall, that's why, huh? Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, okay. I won't start all over again, promise. Okay, so the property soil and the groundwater contamination, I understand that the Department of Economic Development did give a grant or whatever it is, a loan, not a loan, but a grant to Portland. And I know that there was a comprehensive report and analysis done on the property and in the soil and things like that. But my concern is the report says it's like a ballpark, this is what they expect. What happens if it exceeds $750,000? Is it a guarantee that we can get more money? A 100% guarantee that will get above and beyond what $750,000 is? We don't know that. It's merely an assumption. And the definition of assumption is not a 100% guarantee. It's a best guess, a speculation, or a supposition. It's not a guarantee. 750 is going to cover it, and we're going to have more money. I also have the financial concerns as well. And the downside is a huge risk, I think. I've lived in West Hartford for most of my life. I've been in Portland since 2005. I've seen a lot going on, a lot of good things done, but all those good things require additional development and or maintenance. We got the airline rail trail, we got the sports complex, we got the Elm Crest, we got the Keegan sand pit, we got the quarry. All that costs money, even if we didn't start those projects yet. We're bonding. What is bonding? We have more debt. And what really struck me was in 2012, and you could look this up yourself, the Moody's rating for Portland was at AA3. For those of you that may not be familiar with the rating, AA3 is considered, quote, stable outlook. We are now in October 16th of 2017 rather, 5 years later, we were degraded.
No, we weren't degraded.
You are now down to a negative credit outlook in October 16th, 2017. It wasn't a negative credit watch, it was a negative credit outlook. You can confirm that on Moody's.
No,
Also,
that is true, Linda. But
Yes.
we were not downgraded.
your financial rating was downgraded. Your financial rating was downgraded.
Okay.
Okay, and I will.
I don't want to interrupt.
Okay. And it wasn't a negative credit watch. A negative credit watch is actually better because, well, not better, but it says you have potential of being downgraded. But this was went from a stable outlook to a negative credit outlook. And a negative credit rating will increase borrowing costs. We're borrowing a lot of money, bonding a lot of stuff. And because of that, it will cost us more to borrow or bond more money. And I'm concerned about that. You know, if this was such a great piece of parcel, a developer would be willing to probably remediate it if he thought it was as valuable as we say it is. And I don't see that happening. So I want to say, why are we jumping on this right now? And I know that with the fiscal environment that Connecticut is facing, it impacts a lot of the municipalities. Out of the 169 municipalities, 136 of them, I think, 139 of them have had education funds totally cut to zero or a reduction. Portland, fortunately, is on the reduction side and not the total elimination like other towns and cities are. But that will affect us as well. And so I still ask, why are we jumping on this purchase so quickly? If nobody is interested in it privately, because they think it's going to be too expensive, we have a lot of projects that we've bonded. Why do we have to do it now? We know our taxes are going to go up in Connecticut. The state is going to increase them. Why now? What's the rush? If nobody was interested in this property 10 years ago, another few years is not going to make a difference. We just need to make sure we make sound financial use of our money. I am not for this project, at least not now. I think it's a great idea. It sounds wonderful. But I believe there's a difference between a want and a need. This is not a need for Portland, in my opinion. This is just my opinion. Thank you.
You did ask a question about why now, why we're asking the question, why the question is in front of us. It's because with the cleanup dollars, the state have many people that will utilize those dollars if we don't. So the $750,000 is assigned to Portland, but if we don't acquire the property, which is a requirement to access those dollars, then we will not access them.
I have a question. If it does exceed the $750,000, are we guaranteed 100% that we will be given above and beyond 100%? There's no guarantee. There's no guarantee.
I do want to point out that when you talked about the studies, the $200,000 that the Department of Economic and Community Development spent or gave to us to
On the
spend
report, yep.
is on the phase 2 and 3, which is up here. So there is a comprehensive analysis of this property. That doesn't go away. I mean, that's been done, and that's been done by Ty and Bond, as I
Right.
pointed out. So in terms of the $750,000, I think that Amy wanted to address that. I asked her that very question. It's an excellent question. It is something that I want our licensed environmental professional to answer.
Okay, but I mean, I don't need to get into a answer question, comments, this and that. It's just my opinion.
Sure.
And I just
I understand.
don't see the 100% funds coming to us.
Amy, did you just
Yeah,
want to
there
comment on that?
are a couple points I would like to address. I'm not going to lower this because the next person will come up here and have to raise it again. So I'm just going to talk loud and boisterous anyway. So yes, I tonight brought every single piece of every soil boring data, everything, my reports. I brought everything. I'm leaving it here at the library. Anybody, feel free to look through. The cost estimates are in there, hazardous building materials survey, all the grant applications, everything's there. So I've said this so many times in this room, I don't have x-ray vision, and my crystal ball is in the shop. But I have done hundreds of borings along that property. I've investigated it for years. I've been doing this for 22 years, and I have a lot of successful brownfields remediation projects under my belt. A lot right over the bridge in Middletown. So we have investigated, we have done our due diligence, we have put an estimate on that. Yes, my remedial plan calls for capping. Yes, it's easiest if we are able to put parking lots and buildings, but I understand you still have yet to determine the highest best use. A couple of things come into what if 750,000 is not enough? So the first thing I want to point out is, yes, the state has gone through and cut every municipality's funding, but what they didn't cut was the brownfields program. And so anyone who's picked up a fact sheet or a flyer from the front will see the quote came out only last month from DECD. For every dollar they have invested in brownfields cleanup, in return, there has been $11.41 for every dollar generated in private investment or economic development for the town. That is huge, and that is why they did not cut the brownfields program or the funding. They keep that rolling. With these projects, I've had a couple projects that came up. Give you an example, Steve's gas station in Middletown. So we get an assessment grant and we go out and we do the assessment, and what do we find? All the panels on the front of the building on the outside were put in with this special high flexibility caulk that had high concentrations of PCBs. And PCBs are the new hot thing, and they're in building materials. And so my entire remediation grant for all the soil went to just handling that PCB caulk. And I went back to DECD, and I said I did everything I was supposed to do. Here are your state regulations that required me to do this with the PCBs, and it ate up our grant, and they gave us the rest of the money to finish. Cohansey School in Waterford, another example. So I've been able to go back to DECD and make a case if there were some unforeseen circumstance. Now, what I didn't bring up before about the capping is DEP has come out with a wave 2 of new regulations where they're making some remediation regulations less stringent. And one of the ones they're making less stringent is exactly the contamination that you have on your site. So there may be potential that they're not going to have us do 2 feet of clean fill in the asphalt or 4 feet of clean fill. They realize that these type of petroleum impacts do end up coming up everywhere. They are from leaking trucks idling, cars sitting, these surface impacts of petroleum. So they have a wave 2 coming out that could allow us less, stringent regulations when it comes to remediation. I also told you I was looking at the opportunity of getting another petroleum terminal that wants some storage tanks to come take these off your hands. You saw the cost estimate, $200,000. If I could save that, then yes, I would guarantee. But until you put a shovel in the ground, or the time that waits, the prices go up. It's inflation, it's industry, it's the cost of gas, transporting. All these things come into play. Now, I'm going to say Mrs. Purple. I love that name. Purple, Mrs. Purple, where she went. Okay, and so you said, why doesn't a developer come in? They would come in and maybe do this and benefit from the cleaned up property. But the property value is upside down. 10 years, you've heard the interest. All I deal with every day or developers calling me saying, what brownfields, where are the opportunities? You know, they look for these things. If that property was an opportunity for a developer, if he was able to get the grant funds, if he was able to get the liability protection, he would be in there. So the avenue of the town, and this is why the state brownfields program is set up this way, the avenue for the town to get in, get the grant, get the liability protection, clean it up, then sets the developer up. You may see, once you decide to buy the property, knowing you have the grant, with the press that's been coming out, you may have a developer contact the town and say, okay, I want to start negotiating when you clean up the grant, clean up the property. I want to be the first in line for this opportunity if you are turning over the property. I guess you could.
Of course.
And I'll be silent.
Yes.
My concern, I said, was two, both financial and environmental.
Yep.
Addressing the environmental. Still, the financial is what I'm concerned about.
Yep.
There's no 100% guarantee that if it exceeds 750, it will be fully funded by the economic development
Correct.
department. Thank you.
Right, there's no guarantee. Every time these are competitive, but your project scored in the highest tier for DECD to invest because they saw the potential.
Thank you. Mr. Morse?
Bob Morse, 21 Plumrose Court. I don't think I need the mic. First, a question on the vote on the 28th.
Yes.
That's a vote by residents, taxpayers, correct?
Yes, yes,
Is that binding on the Board of Select?
yes, yes,
It is, binding vote.
yes.
Okay, thank you. I am certainly in favor of economic development. I think the town needs it. It's really scary to realize that it's the residential property that pulls the wagon for the town financially. It leads the town. That's where most of the money comes from. The more industrial and commercial properties we can get, I think the better off we'll be. So I'm all in favor of economic development. I too am concerned about the $750,000. I am not an expert in the field that Amy is, but that's a pretty small number when you look at that piece of property down there. And you look around at other construction that we've read about, you look at Dunkin' Donuts Park, and they moved out of there and deposited in, is it Portland, or I guess it's Portland, off of 17. The money that was involved there. And I would wonder if, this is really a rhetorical question, but would Amy's firm buy a performance bond that says, we will guarantee, we will pay anything above our 750 estimate?
Yep. So I am asked about that all the time, and it's not really Ty and Bond that does the performance bond, it's the remediation contractor. And so the only town in my 22 years I know that went this route was Enfield, and I brought this up to Susan, where they put a project out saying, this is the grant we have, we want to guarantee you go in. And somebody did take that. I don't even think the project kicked off or went into remediation yet. But, that is an option, and that's for the remediation contractor. My job is kind of the watchdog. I write the specification. You're digging out this soil, you're moving it to here, I write that specification, they bid on it.
But we've had to commit before they bid on it. And we could have an empty hand when it comes to guarantees.
Yep, you have to put it out to bid. And again, the remediation plan can only come in when you decide what you're going to use the property for.
And I think, Bob, in terms of how municipalities manage these grants is typically through a brownfield committee, which we have not formed because we haven't started this project. And within that committee, I would hope that, and I know there's some people in the audience that have some experience in this type of endeavor, you would design your plan to optimize what the grant pays for in terms of the development. So in terms of the capping of the project with the asphalt, we can utilize that in terms of either parking or vendors that may be there on a seasonal basis. And then the building of a building could be located such that an RFP goes out and someone then comes in and says they're going to be a partner to the town to build the restaurant or to build the commercial development that would occur there. But that's all part of the remediation plan, so that as you're redeveloping this site, you're giving consideration to the return that you're going to get on it, as opposed to just having a piece of land that's cleaned up. You want it cleaned up to the tune of being able to then go in and have economic development produce and come out of it. At $16,000 for that land right now, and with the potential of nothing happening there, there's no jobs, there's no development there, and I would argue it's beginning to degrade every year that it sits there. You know, we started this project in 2013. As that degradation occurs, that erodes our grand list. So one of the things that the Planning and Zoning Commission said was important to our community was the redevelopment of the 14-acre site, which was Elmcrest, and the redevelopment of the riverfront. So in terms of the plan that's being followed, it's in accordance with what the Plan of Conservation and Development said to do, and this goes back probably a dozen years as opposed to not just 10 years, because we just redid the plan in 2016. And in 2006, we were talking about redeveloping Elmcrest, and we were talking about redeveloping the riverfront as well as our downtown, which then opens up the potential for Route 66 going east. If we don't look at economic development in this town, and from what I know in dealing with statewide issues and matters, Portland is not going to get healthier economically, as Mrs. Purple pointed out. The state is pulling back money and support of their towns. We need to redevelop our town with the thought of getting gainful revenue. And if we do that as a community and we utilize the expertise that we have and the dollars, I would argue, that we're owed back from the state, because everybody in this room pays income tax and pays other fees to the state of Connecticut. That money has to come back here and help us to run our schools and fix our roads and our sidewalks and things. And that's why we're bringing this to the town, so that we can get more money to run the town. You're absolutely right. If you're depending on a residential grand list growing, that's a very poor future for our town. So I think you bring up a very good point.
The $750,000 grant, we get that after we buy the property and after we submit the plan, correct?
No. The plan has been submitted for the cleanup. The plan is the grant application. It's the phase 2 and 3.
So
They gave us the $750,000, but you cannot start cleaning it up unless you own the property.
do we have that money in a lockbox with
Yes.
our name on it?
Yes.
There's
At our
no
last
legal
Board
way
of
that the
Selectmen's,
governor or anybody else
at our
can pull
last,
the string?
I will tell you, at the last Board of Selectmen's meeting, and all 7 of us were here, Lilia Kiltika, who is the program manager for this project, came to our meeting, and she stood at this podium, and I made her say that we have that money. So she said that that money is ours, and I did send to the Associate Commissioner about a month ago, before we noticed the meetings, to ensure in writing that we have the dollars, and he said, yes, we do. And we have a assistance agreement that's in my office for the $750,000. It's the same question our attorney asked us this evening as well.
Well, you have more confidence than I do in Hartford. Right.
Well, they've told me no, Bob, I'll tell you, on a lot of other things that I've asked for. They're not afraid to say no.
Right. I've heard a lot of discussion, or mention of capping. I mean, the thing that got my eye on this was the restaurant. I love that, a nice destination restaurant right on the water. But I hear a lot of talk about capping.
The
parking
foundation,
lot.
the
I think
foundation.
this will be an expensive parking lot to serve no one. And I'm afraid that that's the easy way out, when we find some things that aren't expected when we start digging. Just one more comment, I think it will increase the value of our homes. When people drive across the bridge, they don't have to look down there and see that. It's something that real estate agents can talk about, that we have this beautiful park and restaurant or whatever it's gonna be. That's great. I think there's one other thing we can do to help keep our real estate values up, and that is to clean up Main Street, and that won't cost anything. By cleaning up Main Street, I mean the parking situation. That is what hurts the value of our properties. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Anybody else in that role? Yes, sir.
I want to know where the top of the soil, when you dig it out, where's that gonna go?
So I don't know if I can go backwards, because I'm going to go right to my remedial plan, so we're not just talking turkey. All right, oh, okay. So let's go here. So I'm going to come out here again, I'm real animated tonight. The red blocks, that's where I got to dig out, right? I got to put it somewhere.
Yeah, where's
Some of it I got to send off site. If you see the big red blob by the tanks,
Yeah.
that's where the oil leaked, right? So I got oil to 8 feet over there. I gotta go dig that out. I calculate it, I got a volume, I know what the cost is to get rid of it. Could send it locally in Connecticut over to Clean Earth in Plainville. What I love about that is we get the oil out of the ground for petroleum. Now we got oil back in the ground where it came from, but I gotta take it out and I gotta send it somewhere. It's gonna go to a facility like Clean Earth. What they do, they typically asphalt batch it and recycle it. You know, go somewhere to Tilcon to make roads, right? That's the process. That's been the process for 20 years. Sometimes it kills me, but
Excuse me, don't we have a transfer station right?
you have Red Technologies, yes, and they
No,
too,
the one wherever it is, it comes in on the railroad car.
yeah. Used to be Waste Management, now it's Red Technologies. They pick up a lot of my stuff. And so they will find a place to take it. Stop, is that what you're making fun of? Sorry. So yes, this is what I do for a job. This has been my life for 22 years. So yes, they will take it and find an ultimate home for it. They don't dispose of it over in your facility. It's like a transfer station. Yeah. So I call them up, I got a drum, you know, gasoline, Plymouth, come get it, they'll take it, and they'll bring it to an appropriate licensed facility. So Phoenix Oils is when, I called it Phoenix, they changed to Clean Earth, sorry. They're one of the appropriate licensed facilities that can take non-hazardous soil. Again, I brought all my reports. We have non-hazardous petroleum impacts. I don't have to send it out to Chicago, I don't have to, you know, truck it over state lines. That saves me money. I'm gonna find a local spot to put it. So I'm digging deep over by the tanks. That stuff's gotta come out and that's gotta go off-site. So I'm over here, right? So I'm saying off-site disposal. I got 1,200 to 1,500 tons of soil. I'm bringing it to Phoenix, now known as Clean Earth. And then I have all these other impacts. I can't just leave them there. I can't have people come into contact, so I gotta do something with them. Most of them are just 1 to 3 feet below grade. I could dig them up and send them off, but it's gonna cost you per ton, plus the trucking over there, you know, the tipping fees, the contractor that's gonna excavate all that and load it up. Here, my plan is I can take that volume of soil and I can cap it in a location on site. Let's say the bottom one, right? You got 2 spots there. I can take those 2 spots out. What if you want that one as open space? You don't wanna build on that one, you wanna keep it open, fine. I'll make that happen. Second one, it's got a little more. I need a little bigger space to deal with that stuff. I can move that, I can consolidate where my cap's just on 1 parcel. Just one, right? I'll cap that, but keep in mind, if I do it, I have to be conscious of the floodplain. If I raise that grade of the floodplain, I gotta create flood storage somewhere else on the site. So, that's my remedial plan. Mostly, it's superficial stuff. If those DEP wave 2 changes to the regulation come in, if I wanted to, again, didn't want to dig anything out, let's say we didn't want to dig anything out, and you were amenable to parking, but I understand. People may not want parking on the riverfront, you may not have a need for the parking. If you did have a need, and this were going to be parking, with the wave 2, maybe we just pave. How much is asphalt to put down for an acre of a site? It's not as much as digging that soil out. So it's happy medium. Decide what you want to do with the property. If it's clean this up to get a developer interested, I'll do that. For the $750, no problem. You get the property value right side up, you will have interest. But if you want to keep the property and you want to use it for a particular use, you have to tell me what that is, so I can remediate, so you can have that sustainable use. It's got to be sustainable. Once I cap it, you know, unless you're going to go dig it out, we have to make it amenable to your reuse. That's super important.
Yeah, why do we need an outside contractor? Why can't we use the local?
So with any state or even federal funds, you need to publicly bid. I even had to go through the process with Portland to get on this project. So they always require public bid. So it'll be advertised. Now, I don't know what Portland's particular ordinance is, but in Middletown, they have to give preference to a local company. If there are certain circumstances that if a more qualified company comes in, but they're within 10% of the lowest bid, then they can go with that company. But their priority is local over there.
I got one more thing.
Yep.
okay? I supervise the development of Harbor Park in Middletown.
Yep.
We had a hard time getting $1,000 a month rent for that restaurant over there.
Yep.
So if we think we have good ideas, grandeur down here, getting big money on the restaurant, it's not gonna happen because the wind blows down there from Madagascar and stinks.
Well, I'll admit, I live in Middletown, right? I'm on Hunting Hill. I work in the Middle Oak building. I've been working on Middletown's brownfields for 20 years. You know, that's pretty much where I got my start. So I've done 101 properties over there. I've done every property on their riverfront. I know the riverfront is fill material. And I deal with that for every development, from the regionalization of the wastewater treatment plant to the community boathouse. It's Only Natural Market, Remington Rand, Steve's Gas Station, Mid-State Auto Body. I could go on all night. So prior to coming here, you know, I wanted to get some lease rates. I wanted to get lease rates for the Blue Oar. I wanted to jazz you with that. But I'm an environmental person. That is not my bailiwick. As part of this, in developing the highest best use and typically working with a brownfield committee developed by the town, you get a market study done. And somebody comes in and tells you exactly what income you will get. They develop what's called a pro forma. I'm not loud enough? Really? Oh, I'm sorry. So a company will come in, and I do many of these for my brownfields. I don't do the work, but we find or advertise for a company to come in, and they do the research. What can you do here? What's viable? The community boathouse, before we started that project in Middletown, we had to do a market study. And we looked at residential, we looked at office, we looked at recreation. Is a hefty study that we conducted for that. And we developed a pro forma. Here's what it's gonna cost if this is what you want. And here's the money you'll make by year, over term, how long to pay it off, what do you have to bond, what's the percentage. There are companies that do that. And so that's what you'd be looking for. You would be looking for someone to help you work with the committee to tell you what's viable and what's the most income potential you could get from the property.
There's a lot of contamination down there. I worked on that job on the new pipe.
So which one, this site? So they had I will tell you, documented in the reports and doing my work on the property, they had releases. They had to bring in companies to do remediation previously. Previously, DEP was involved because they lost, 10,000 gallons or something of oil. And so they had to, I think it was Crop or North, one of the companies, did the remediation for the property owner under order or at least nudged by DEP. So we were looking for that. We were looking for opportunities, where maybe the remediation wasn't complete. We didn't find floating oil. So we've been out there 5 years now.
I think the next gentleman had a question.
Has anyone spoken to Buckeye Pipeline?
So we have not reached out to Buckeye Pipeline because there's nothing you can really reach out for unless you own the property.
Well, I have a good understanding of who owns the pipeline on that property. It's not Buckeye.
Okay.
It's that property. So if you're gonna dig it up, how far are you gonna go?
If
You're gonna
they,
dig up the whole road?
yep. The property owner does not own past the site. That would be Buckeye. So where,
Buckeye tells each terminal they own from the header on.
I don't know what the header is. And
It's on 56 Brownstone Avenue, so you guys have the longest section.
so that we would have to look into with Buckeye, but I would maybe beg to argue and that we could get DEP to help us get Buckeye to come take that off of the road at Brownstone.
We need to know that by next week when we vote.
Okay.
I think they're gonna argue too.
We could reach out.
We brought it up to Buckeye today.
Okay.
Who, can I ask you your name?
Ed Fuller.
Okay.
Hi, Ed.
And tell me what they said.
I only talked to him twice, but we were gonna reach out because we're the other terminals, so.
Yeah.
And our
Okay.
understanding is the line might be full.
The valves are open. We inspected, for hazardous building materials. Everything's open and empty. So whatever valve they shut it off at, it's prior to coming onto the property. Yeah. I would be eager to know what that is.
Because we've had to replace from the header on.
Yeah. I'd be interested.
That's before we owned the new property. We had to put pipeline over that property.
Okay. So my experience with utilities, and I do a lot of work with Eversource,
Now leave me your card before
Prior.
you leave, or?
prior and
No,
you.
just give me your number, Ed.
And typically, I've had their involvement on sites. Maybe I'm doing a site with big sets of transformers, and they're on the property. It's my site, but the transformers are owned by the utility. And this may be a situation where we find out that Buckeye owns up to a certain point. I don't know how this guy could own,
Where they argue is
yeah,
very far back.
yeah. So we want to find that out by next week.
Yeah.
And we'll reach out to Buckeye, and I'll reach out to DEP and see what they've done in these situations. This isn't the first terminal that Buckeye was connected to be a brownfield and be remediated.
Thank you. Yes?
Spencer, how are you? Amy, I know we have the red on the bottom, or looking at the bottom, so it's example. Are the only contaminated spots at the bottom are the red, or is there others? So my question would be, could we make 2 out of the 3 that don't need a deep restriction? What would it take to make them?
Yes. Right now, all of this is considered separate parcels, so you have 3 of them. And I was saying before, if you wanted to pull everything up onto one parcel, you could have one parcel that's a capping ground and have deed restriction only on that parcel. Yes.
And we could do lot line revisions, it's our requires deed restriction.
Yeah.
Is that something feasible in the 750, or is that, what would it take, for example, how big, how deep are we talking on the lower?
That would be covered under the 750. My 750 is to deal with what's there. Doesn't really matter where I move it on the 3 parcels. I'm still moving it.
The red is all the contamination, known contamination. correct?
That's, yes.
Okay, so it's very feasible to take all the red off the lower 2, obviously put it on the
Yeah.
top end. So that is, and then we
Correct. That's right.
If we could end up with 2 clean beans and 1 dirty bean, it's better than.
Right.
3
And
You're gonna be on the Brownfield committee, Ben.
And I did talk about in my presentation, if you wanted to ready one of the properties for development now, so you can get an income while you're doing the remediation. The remediation doesn't happen overnight. Again, you go to bid, you got the bid specs, you get the contractor under contract, you get them out there. We could be looking at 2019.
Any other questions, Ben?
stuff.
Yes.
I think we can get a 4th lot out of it.
Yeah.
We could still live in the tree.
I like the way he thinks, yeah.
Hi, I'm
Hi.
Christina
Hi, Christine.
Eaglesfire.
Hi, Christine.
I've lived in Portland since 2001, and I'm originally from California. And as I see these types of developments, I always think about, how they do things in California. And California, the owner would have been responsible for cleaning it. So if you contaminate, you clean it. So I'm not even sure why we're even paying anything for the property if we have to clean it up. And then secondly, I go to California 3 or 4 times a year. All my family lives there, and my property value has decreased in the last 9.5 years. And our taxes have been going up. And I see my family and my friends and their houses in California continually increasing in price. And it's very frustrating to have a property here that decreases in value year by year and have to pay more property tax. And I'm just afraid that this is all potential. This is potential economic development, potential benefits, potential job creation, which will be restaurant jobs. So I don't understand how that is a strong development of the economy of Portland. So the way I think about economic development is not developing through restaurants where you're going to be hiring people at minimum wage and a restaurant that's going to be open seasonally. A real development would be if you start bringing, tech companies here, or, you start attracting 21st century types of developments that bring in real incomes. And that is what's happening in California.
Well, one of the things about this parcel is not just the parcel that we're talking about, but the neighbors that are nearby. There are some very successful industrial properties in the area. And in addition, as even though Mr. Kanata said no one swims in the quarries, in calendar year 2016, 100,000 people came to the quarries and swam in the quarries. So that's
But can we talk
the
about
most.
21st century type of
Well,
plans?
I just wanted to point out, in that particular area, there's a lot of water. I don't know that it is a place for a tech company, but its potential in the land is there if that is the best
I'm
use
saying
of
the
that
town as a whole is
property.
for economic
But,
development.
I'm sorry, but I just wanted to add to the fact that there is dollars that come to the town from that property. And it's an average of about $350,000 to $425,000 that comes from the Brownstone Exploration Discovery Park. And as those potential customers and utilizers of that only area, I'm not talking about the rest of the town, but that area, and an improvement in the access to the river does enhance that area in terms of the park that's there already and has been there since 2006 and has done very well and has given to the town $2.8 million since it opened. So that is economic development in terms of that parcel. Your point about other kinds of industries and commercial development are some of the things that Mary has talked about in the commercial building that's scheduled to be at Brainerd Place. And what we're hopeful for, we can't tell you definitely that this private company is going to do this, that, or the other thing, but what we do know is those opportunities are definitely there, and that our economic development specialist tells us this, and they've already started to invest in Brainerd Place. There's $100,000 that came in with the application for that parcel, and they tell us they'll give us $250,000 once they start taking out the permits for Phase 1 on Brainerd Place, and Phase 2 would be another $250,000. Added to that, the construction jobs. Added to that, the opportunity for people who will live there and will want to have the opportunity to go to the riverfront if they want to take a walk, or they want to utilize a commercial operation that may be there, or they want to fish, or they want to have a boat that comes up and takes them to So anyway, I just give you a little snippet. I don't want to go into too much more detail, but your point is well made. I appreciate it. Anybody else in that area? Rick?
I have mixed feeling a bit on this project. I believe it is a very good opportunity for the town, probably a good investment. However, throughout my last 40 years, there's a lot of opportunities for good investments. More often than not, I'm not in a financial position to be able to take that investment. And it's different here because you can, it'd be nice if I could go to my neighbor and say, I need some extra dough for this, I don't have it. But here we can say, yeah, we can do that. So again, I certainly am familiar with the needs. I think this is a good opportunity. However, I was here the last meeting and I had the chairman of the Water Commission stand up and ask the board, how are we going to pay back the $1 million that we're in the hole on water and sewer back to the general taxpayers? Didn't get any answers. I'm also familiar with an engineering report that was endorsed by the Board of Selectmen that identifies $15 million that needs to be put into our water and sewer system that we haven't moved at all forward on. Here last week, and we'll talk again tonight about $3.3 million worth of sidewalks that we want to do, but we had allocated $1 million. So where's the other 2.2 going to come from? I just met with the Long Range Capital Commission on Thursday, and I know I identified probably $300,000 or $400,000 this year that should be allocated to replace equipment that we have that's getting old. And I'm sure probably most of the other departments that go in there will also have requests. So, as we begin to bond more, we've got a $10 million bond floating out there that we really haven't started tapping. 410,000 more bonding here. Again, I just kind of identified probably $20 million worth of monies that need to be spent in the next 15 years. And I'm concerned, basically, where's all the dough coming from? Back when I first became Public Works Director 23 years ago, it was rare that we bonded, and only for big projects, big water projects. I said, now we lease, we bond. I guess it's the American way. Interest, you always hear interest rates are great. I get concerned. It's kind of not the way when I was raised. Basically, if you didn't have the dough to get it, you didn't get it. You didn't borrow for it. So again, I'm hopeful that the taxpayers and the board keep in mind. Again, you got $1 million in debt in water and sewer. You got $15 million in an engineering study that says you need to put into your water and sewer system. You got $2.3 million if you want to continue with your sidewalk program. It's all coming at you. I'm not sure where the dough's coming from.
And I think to your point, Rick, without more customers, it means that just the 2,300 customers are paying for water. And that's why to have more customers at Brainerd Place will assist in the needs that we have for water and sewer. And we have to have other customers in order to pay for these things. Good points. Johanna?
Joanna Sherman, Old Marlboro attorney. clarify. I have two questions. One is, I know there hasn't been a decision made on what to do with the property should the town buy it. But there seems to have been some guesses with the idea of a restaurant or something of that nature. Given that we earn $16,000, $600 and change for taxes, what would be a reasonable guess for the income for the town, both in what would be gained through the construction of the property and also year-over-year taxes? So that would be one question. And the other one was more of a technical one, having to do with if we're moving dirt in order to contaminated soils, that you were mentioning that if you move it into a floodplain, you have to find flood storage. And if memory serves, the only place that's really not in a legit floodplain is sort of in the northernmost parcel over to the east. So if you need to, how does one find flood storage? So those were the two things. Thank you.
Can we start with Mary
Oh,
with
yeah.
the first
Okay,
question?
sure, yeah. Joanna, to answer your question, the total taxes on the property are $16,683. And then if you take that cost of bonding, so I estimate $410,000. That's the $385 purchase price plus roughly $35,000 in closing costs and legal fees is $410. Using a rate of 4% interest over 30 years, that's an annual payment of $23,484. So the annual cost to cover, the cost to carry for both the bond and the taxes during that remediation period before we make the decision to either sell or lease is $40,167 per year. So that comes out to a monthly cost of $3,347. So essentially, if you could lease any one of those parcels for $3,350 a month, you would cover your cost of carry, you would cover your bonding cost, and then you would cover your tax. So anything over and above that would be revenue to the town. And as Ben had said, we haven't made any decisions. Some of those parcels could be sold, and then one of those parcels could be maintained for lease. So our initial investment could be made back through the sale or exceeded through the sale. Yeah.
Saying that, we keep talking about parking lot space and brownstone quarries possibly leasing space and parking. Has that been discussed in dollar amounts thrown out there? As what that would be worth to the town?
No. And that would be something that they would have to negotiate. I can tell you that it is not part of the existing lease. The existing lease is for the quarry parcel only. And so any lease for any additional space would require them to negotiate a new lease for that space. That's not part of what's in their lease. The parking that they're allowed to use is the parking that's on that park area, but it's not part of these, because we cannot lease that space. We don't own that space.
And they have expressed interest in leasing.
Yeah, we have talked, and the selectmen have at least initiated. We did have some discussions. It's not something, obviously, that I can talk about, but Rick Shar in particular on the Board of Selectmen and I will be meeting in March with the owners, because they do have a vested interest. I mean, they have made a very successful business on Brownstone Avenue. And I'll repeat the numbers, between $300,000 and $400,000 that comes to the town. And my concern is that as time goes on and the property along the river degrades month after month after month, that degrades our ability to raise revenue from what we've already said is a very successful endeavor. So to be short-sighted and not invest in our community and be able to say that economic development, tourism, attraction from the river, the ability to own the riverfront, and the option as to whether you want to clean it up to the level that we're talking about here and either resell it to another endeavor for the $385,000 in principal, closing costs, and fees that you encounter. I don't see how you lose. What you have to look at is how do you gain. And if you're able to improve the already existing businesses, and it's not just the Brownstone Exploration Discovery Park, it's also the Hubby for Hire, and it's the welding company that's nearby, and it's the water and sewer specialty company that's down the road, and it's the transmission company that's on Silver Street. There's so many other businesses there. And if we show that we're cleaning up the riverfront, and we're taking the opportunity to say we're reinvesting in business in this town for a change. I think that says a lot. And I know that the quarries, just to come back to your question, JT, they do want to work with us in terms of another.
So I guess the reason why I threw that out there is, there's concerns expressed about the dollar amount. And then you were saying $3,300 in the lease right away could cover our costs. So if you were to make discussion with brownstone quarries and say, what are you looking for? How many extra parking spaces? What is this worth to you? Maybe we could, get a certain part paved right away and start making the lease and cover everything right away. And if you could prove that is reasonable and doable, then I would be more on board to say, yes, let's spend this money because it's gonna take that much less out of our costs immediately.
Right. And it is something, again, I can't tell you today to the audience what we're saying, but I think you're going down the right avenue, definitely. I mean, it's something that we have talked about and will continue to discuss. Because they're already paying us $7
Before you go forward, I still
Yes.
have to address this woman's question on the capping. So, yes, in order to create more flood storage, I have to create land or remove land for the water to go to. So if we are going to the floodplain picture, I'm going back. We gotta go forward. Right here. So yes, if I'm filling somewhere, I have to take away some of the green blob. So maybe it's on the middle parcel. If I'm filling on the northern parcel, right, I have to take some away. Here's the other thing too that I sort of learned dealing with Middletown's development of their community boathouse on their riverfront, because they're in the floodplain totally. So there's nowhere on the entire site for me to do compensation over there. So I'm looking for other areas. And now they have another site where they need remediation. It's just around the bend. So I'm saying to DEEP, since I have to dig out right over there, throw a rock and hit it, since I have to dig that out because it's contaminated, can I use that as my flood storage, my rollover for this? So if it were a situation where we were looking maybe for another parcel, town owns a lot of parcels over there, if I had to create some flood storage, maybe there's potential.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes,
Me,
Mr. Jarzabek, yeah.
John Jarzabek, Summer Street, Portland. First question is, when is the last time the town of Portland marketed and sold a piece of its real estate? I don't remember. I've been here all my life. I don't remember one ever. So I would say.
Well, there was a parcel, a very small parcel, John, that was on Marlborough Street, that was sold. We also sold, I'm not gonna remember how many parcels, Colby Transport. We sold some parcels on Airline Avenue, and he has some interest in some other, parcels that
So
I.
nothing substantial, little bits and pieces, little pieces of pie.
You asked me which parcels we had,
Yeah.
we had sold, those we had. That we, and that's my time, so I don't know if there are other parcels that the town had sold, so.
Next question is,
Yep.
what would it cost to clean this property up the right way? Instead of taking a shower and putting on your old underwear, what would it cost to fix that the right way?
Okay, when you say right way, I'm gonna assume that you mean clean it up to residential standards so
Exactly.
kids could play.
Yeah.
So we did an estimate to show to the real estate agent and the property owner what it would cost for a regular developer coming in here trying to clean it up for high-end residential retail, like, not retail, high-end residential housing, like they thought this property had that value. So in order to dig out all the contamination and get it off-site, my disposal cost for the soil alone, the volume of soil alone, was $699,000. That doesn't include a contractor. That doesn't include any
What's
trucks.
the bottom line?
I just told you just the soil disposal. So if you wanted to add on to that, all of the fees for the contractor, I'm throwing numbers out here, right?
You have to bring soil back in too to bring the level back.
Of course, you could be talking 1.5 too, if you wanted to build residential so kids could live there.
The
Yes.
third question, or next question I have is, as far as your firm, what's your percentage of being accurate?
So, good question, because I tout this in every proposal I'm trying to bid a job on. I have a track record of being within 10% of the cost that a contractor puts in for a bid, and I make a living on that. I make a living on that.
You or your firm?
How about I say it? I'm individually licensed. My license does not say tie and bond LEP. It says me. I'm individually licensed.
Okay, that's fine. So you're pretty confident in your numbers.
I am.
And the last thing, more of a comment than anything, is in the years that the quarry's been operating, and yes, maybe there's 100,000 visitors. Most of them come in by bus, and I don't see them at Burger King, at Cumberland Farms, at the gas station, other than lining the pockets of Mr. Hayes. I don't see them doing anything else for anything else important. So I don't see how this, if you put a restaurant down there, maybe a few people will come. But these inner city kids, most of them that are coming to visit the quarry in the middle of summer, they're probably not gonna have the dough to walk across the street and patronize the restaurant.
Can I make a comment? I'm so sorry. So, I want to just,
I don't know.
Okay.
I would be careful.
all right.
Thank you for your comments. Yeah, Alan?
Ms. Rupp?
Yep.
Alan McKittrick, 235 Middletown Road, near Portland. I'm a taxpayer and have a business here in town. I'm very much in favor of this development. I think the town will be absolutely crazy to pass up this opportunity. That being said, I'd like to know if there's a shelf life for the state funding. Is there a time where we're going to lose that potential
Yeah.
to have that cleanup?
Okay.
If we don't act soon?
Yeah. So you're awarded the grant in 2016. These grants have a 2 to 3 year shelf life. You're already into it. We're on borrowed time with DECD. And what they've said to Susan is, we are guaranteeing the money for you to get through your process. But we're not going to wait too much longer because, okay, we got 59 applications in the round and we funded 10. So that money could go to somebody else. Yes, they've guaranteed it right now.
So what's the end date, would you say?
They didn't give us an end date, and they were here last week at the Board of Selectmen meeting, again, telling everybody, you have the money.
I saw a hand in the back. I see Andy, and then I think I saw John, and then we'll come back to.
Hi, Andy Bauer, 256 Old Marlboro Turnpike. I think the presentation's been very thorough. It's clear you've done your homework, you've done all these bore sites, you've collected lots of data. Your numbers seem solid, so you've made proposals and we understand what we're getting. I look at that property now, and it appears to be, I don't think of it as waterfront. And from what I see of the proposals, it's going to be turned into waterfront. Waterfront is really valuable property, and it's valuable not just economically, but in all kinds of ways. People want to go there because it's the same reason. 2 days ago, I was in Roosevelt Island in New York City. It's a long, skinny island in the middle of the East River, and there's one road down the middle, and there's a walkway all around that 2.1 mile island. Yeah, a couple people walk down that main street, but most people, when you walk down that island, you go to the river because there's just something about waterfront which is really attractive. If we've got solid proposals, estimates, sure, but we've got estimates that indicate that we're gonna make money off this deal, then, I mean, even without that, I'm strongly in favor. The only question mark is that this gentleman brought up here about that pipeline. If that can be answered in our favor, let's do this.
Yeah, we will get an answer.
Yeah.
John?
I'm John Hall. I live at 555 Main Street. I'm also the executive director of the General Center for Earth and Earth, and wrote a letter in support of this back in August of 2016. A lot of my questions have been answered, and a lot of the points I wanted to make have already been made. So I just want to kind of fill in some gaps. First of all, I want to testify to the reputation that Amy Downcourt has in the city of Middletown and her expertise and integrity as a brownfield specialist. I really trust her, and believe me, her reputation in Middletown is extremely high.
How about Connecticut?
So I wanna.
Right? Reach out to anyone you know in any town that's done a brownfield.
Another point this has been made a bit, but I want to underscore it again. It seems to me that the exploration park is one of the hottest, maybe the hottest thing going in Portland right now. In the summer, there are thousands of people. I don't know how many it is on a daily basis, but they're parked everywhere. They're parked at the riverfront parking lot. They're parked under the bridge. They're being shuttled in. It seems like they are as many cars as they can accommodate, they can fill the park. And if those people aren't going up to Main Street to spend money, this is the golden opportunity. It's right where the thousands of people are going. That is the property we should be developing. That's building on our success. Most towns don't have riverfront or waterfront to develop, but those that do find that their economic development and renaissance comes from developing the waterfront. So I am totally in favor of this. One thing that hasn't been mentioned is just on the north side of that northern parcel is a boat ramp. And as these properties, as the blight is removed and development happens, all kinds of uses can take place. People can bring their canoes and kayaks into the river and go to Middletown, or come from Middletown to this site that way. And another point I want to make just quickly is, when we say parking lot, we're not talking just about a flat asphalt. They can have vegetation on it.
You can have
even
landscape,
trees
sure.
that won't damage the cap. So when you say parking lot, don't get a vision of, Walmart's parking lot. It can be attractive. It can be a place for people to walk. It can be a place to feature the history. This is where the history of Portland began, really. I mean, not the agricultural beginning, but the industrial beginning. This is it. This is our major asset. If we're not going to build on this, we're really just missing the boat completely. So, thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
I just want to say that I'm voting no against this, and I think the money should be spent other places. When there's a fire in town, the water runs out of my thing. I have groundwater in my house. I don't believe moving dirt from one side to the other is cleaning it up. To me, it's just putting bad dirt somewhere else, And I was wondering too, the letters that you read tonight, there was 10 or 15 of them. Are those all the letters that you received on this whole project? Or do you have more that you didn't read tonight?
I didn't have anything else to bring tonight.
You read every single one of them? Because I was curious, because all of them voted yes. I thought maybe there might be some no's.
No, I haven't, no. Those are the people who asked me to read them.
I think the money should be spent more on Route 66. I think that would be a better place for more businesses. There's no water up there, so nothing can be built up there. So I vote no on this.
Thank you.
I'd like to
Thank
have
you.
a glass of clean tasting water in Portland too, especially after you pay the bill, you're gasping over the bill. It'd be nice to have a nice, clean tasting glass of water.
Thank you. Anybody else in the back row? The side row? The row, I'm going to finish on this side first, and then we'll go back. Anybody else in this row? Yes, sir.
Yeah, just, first of all, Ryan Schicker, I'm at Bucktown at 245 East Cotton Hill Road. I'm fully in support of the project. I'm just curious, is there a reason we don't do the highest and best use study before we vote? We have the gap funding, we have something the developer doesn't have in this case as a town. Is there a reason we don't explore that?
Well, the highest and best use study would require us to spend the money on the study. So if we were to spend the money on the study, we have to take that money out of our current operating budget. So the money is there for the grant because we got grant study money. So there wasn't any money for that study. And if that's something the board wants to look into and spend operating money on, we can certainly look into doing that.
Is that something you're suggesting?
No, it would make sense to me as a developer, as a town now, Portland being a developer,
Well, I think to give you an idea of the cost, so when we did the Elmcrest project study on that Elmcrest parcel, I believe the cost of that study was $65,000, but we had written a grant and got that grant funded. So that's kind of the ballpark of money we would spend, and when you're spending $385 for the parcel, it's probably $65 to $75 now because we're 4 years out from that original grant. That's probably the ballpark of where we're in, is about $65,000 to $75,000 for that study.
I just would
Amy,
like to
do you want to add
address
to
that.
that?
So let's separate this from Elmcrest a little bit. In my opinion, and I actually had done some environmental work early on that project. That's a different animal. So with this project, as far as highest best use, yes, you would want to get a study done. You would want to have a brownfields committee together. But I think with all the history of everything that's been done, don't forget there was a market and a feasibility study already done, 2004. I don't think we're looking at a grand study. I think we're looking for someone who's in the know and does this for a job to come in and take what's already been done, talk to the committee, come to a public hearing, you put it out there. What would you like to see? I've done enough of these in towns. Okay, we're going to do a website dedicated to opinion. Again, working on the boathouse in Middletown, I've done many of these. What do you like to see? What kind of boathouse do you like? What else do you want to have here? Kayak, canoe. So you can do these studies to get the information in a very quick way. Is there time to do that right now before you make the decision? I'm not sure DECD will wait. I believe that based on the price of this waterfront property, people looking at it knowing, okay, if you clean it up, there's a world of things you could do on this, even if you keep it for your own use versus, to a developer. If you're going to go with the developer, that's the first thing he's going to do on this property. He's already done the legwork to find out what he could put here before he's coming to you to make an offer. It's typically how it goes.
Amy, while you're there.
Donna was next. But go ahead,
But
John.
we
did you
will
have-
come back.
No, we'll finish that up.
All right.
There was a question from a young lady over there about being in California, if someone polluted the property, they cleaned it up.
Yep.
And I thought that's the way it worked around here years ago. In Appalachia State, they always said that John Bloody, if you drove around, got in your car and drove around Connecticut for a day, you couldn't see all the property that you owned. That's how
Yeah.
rich he was.
Yeah.
So why isn't this guy, why aren't we trying to leverage the estate to clean this piece of property up? And maybe they'll say, you know what? We don't want to clean it up, it's gonna cost too much, have it for free, and we won't have to spend $350,000.
Oh my God, there's so many answers to that question. I don't even know where to begin. It starts 300 years ago, and I don't know my history, with Industrial Revolution, and that's something California never had. We deal with different things here in New England as far as contamination. California is very progressive. Their laws are much different than ours. Yeah. Yeah, they're hot on the PCBs too for building materials. But in Connecticut, like our regulations came into play, let's say the early 80s, 83, 86, they started making these regulations. A lot of the contamination on here, we believe, predated the environmental regulations. Now, I brought up the fact that there had been a release before. DEP got involved. They made them do some cleanup on that. But as far as DEP going into a property owner and saying, you clean up your site, it only happens if there's a threat to something vital. A well, drinking water well, contamination near a school, whatever. It's always, where do you draw the line? You put on too much Roundup on your driveway, and your house, now has pesticides above the standard, and DEP is going to come on there and make you clean up your residential yard. Now, I know that's really stretching it, but that's kind of the concept and the mindset. If you've contaminated your property where you're impacting, threatening the waterways, these are the way the regulations are written. If you threaten the navigable waterways, or you've created an air hazard for somebody, yes, DEP can come and do something about it, issue an order. If you're in a formal program, DEP has looked along the way for ways to tack on to industry. One of the things in Connecticut is property transfer program, and they made it a law, and Connecticut's the only one that has it. So if you have a property that's been a dry cleaner, an auto body, furniture stripping, or generated over 100 kilograms of hazardous waste in any 1 month's time, you're an establishment. If you go to sell your property, you have to let DEP know. You have to file forms. DEP has tacked onto those real estate deals, making it a law. And then once you're in a program, DEP makes you investigate and remediate. Well, these type of properties don't fit in that property transfer program. They have a voluntary remediation program, but it's voluntary. And otherwise, unless you're contaminating where they can issue you an order because you've done impairment to the waters of the state or have a significant environmental hazard, that's how they term it, then no, DEP is not going to get involved in these properties that don't trigger something like that.
But weren't they saying that some of that soil was oozing oil down there?
So what we have in 3 locations, and I said there was an opportunity where DEP could come get involved on 3 small locations in here. We have hit on 3 locations where the petroleum concentrations, the standard is 1 part per million, right? This is what I deal with on a daily basis, 1 part per million. So we had 1 million people in here, and then we have 1 person standing over here. It's that 1 person. That is my standard. And if I'm 30 times over what DEP allows, it's a significant environmental hazard. So in 3 spots, I got a particular type of petroleum compound where the regulation is 1 part per million, and I have over 30. I have 35. I have 40. So I could call DEP, which I have, because it was one of the things we used. As soon as we found that significant environmental hazard, we called DEP. It's up to the property owner, right? What the property owner would do at that point, and what I recommend to my clients when I find a significant environmental hazard, is you have 90 days to clean it up. If you clean it up in 90 days, you don't have to report to DEP, right? So get a 55-gallon drum and a shovel and dig that spot out and resample and see if you took care of it. That's what every property owner out there in the know does, so that they're taking care of the significant environmental hazard. They're not raising a flag with DEP. Now here's a different story. Here's where we get the grant and we're able to work with DEP to clean this up and get liability protection. They don't give that to the property owner, they don't give it to the developer. The town has to start it and then it can pass on.
So basically you're saying we have no leverage over the bloody estate?
No.
Get it for nothing or get it for a more reduced rate?
No, and 2 years of negotiation. And I got a little hot-headed, sorry Susan. Yeah, you know, I was dealing with the real estate agent and the attorney, and, you know, I believe the people in the estate are out of state. They didn't have anything to do with the operations, their family where it passed down. My understanding is John Belletti died, left, the property ended up to his mom, and she died shortly after. And so that's where we are. So we have people that know nothing about this. They think the property's riverfront and worth $899,000. And I say, oh, contraire. And, you know, here's my bookcase of stuff that says otherwise. So, you know, $899 minus $750, and that's kind of where we started, and it was a battle. 22 years, I've done more developments than I want to admit to, but, you know, I had started saying several years ago, I think 350. That's where I think we're going to end up. And I think I surprised Susan, because here it was 3 years after that number came out of my mouth, and they were at 385, and she was like, wow, you're good. And I'm like, well, you know, I've been doing this for a while. They know they have riverfront property. I know from doing this that it's valuable, but it's contaminated. So get the grant. You got the grant in hand. If you wait and the grant gets taken away, there's nothing to say that they're going to give you that opportunity again at the state. So you have 750,000, you can get the property right side up, you can develop it, you can have it in perpetuity and be a great asset to the town. Or you can flip it and make your income so that you can afford, doing something with the water line, investing in whatever it is. But we know every municipality I deal with today, we have cuts. How can we make these investments? And a lot of them come to the fruition, they go through this process and they say, okay, this is how we're gonna afford those things that we need. If we have an annual tax roll increase or sale of a property or annual income. I mean, the numbers from the ticket sales from the Discovery Park that Susan quoted, that dollar value is substantial. And if providing them, parking on a lot would increase the money that you get and it's income every year, or whatever it is. Put your prehistoric golf here. I love that place.
We'll go for a few more comments. Donna, you had your hand up.
Donna Cody, 13 Old County Way. Mr. Kelsey, thank you. He answered part of my question. Regarding infrastructure, my other question, about a year ago, we were voting on the $10 million special spending. And here we are again talking about special spending. Are there other land purchases, other school projects, other big things down the pike that we should know now? And why wasn't this part of last year's special spending bonded?
We didn't have a price. We didn't know if we would even be able to negotiate because about a year ago, Donna, they were asking for over 800,000 at that time. And we wouldn't even entertain that price. So we didn't know that price at that time. There's always going to be needs. We built our high school in 2003-04. We built our town hall in 1999 and our police department in about 2000. So in terms of large buildings, it's not anticipated that we have a need for large buildings, but a town is always going to have needs and improvements. What we're trying to do is balance the needs that the town has with investment in the town so that it can begin to have some viable businesses and improvements so that you can get income. And that's what we were told in our plan of conservation and development, and that's why we're proceeding in the way we are.
Is there anything on the radar for when we be here next year talking about another project? Is there anything on the radar right now?
Well, there's other selectmen in the room. Do you want to comment on that? I'm not thinking of any major program. $385,000 in terms of a $34 million budget. That's the annual budget for the town. While every dollar is precious and important, it's not as large of a expenditure that some of the other things that towns do, like buildings and things of that nature. So.
But it's 10.5 in the last 2 years.
Yeah, if I may, so.
Yep.
I'm Dennis, sir. I think, what was that study? What did we identify? Another 23 million, but I think we need probably 4 million, right? So
Now, are you talking about the water and sewer, Ben,
No,
or?
there was one that had to do with everything, because the town did.
Oh.
I believe it hit 33 million, I think.
Including water and sewer, I think,
There was
yeah.
about 4 million worth of, give and take,
Yeah.
all buildings, right?
Right, something in that nature.
So I guess to answer your question, yes, there are.
But it's certainly, we know that we're gonna have expenditures. What we're talking about tonight as a community is how do we get a development that will begin to bring jobs and opportunities and improvements and maintain what we already have. My biggest concern is for selectmen, in having worked with the purchase of the brownstone quarries, which was a similar night. I can remember some of the same arguments being talked about when we purchased the quarries and the 2,500 feet of riverfront park. That was $1,050,000. At the time, the town bought that for cash because they didn't have the time to go to the bond market. And I believe about $400,000 of that was owed in taxes. This property doesn't have that. But the other $600,000 came out of our coffers, and we bought that. Now, there were no votes that night, but the yes votes prevailed. And I think that story speaks for itself in terms of being able to invest in our town. Nobody thought that that big hole in the ground was going to do anything for this town. I mean, I'm not sure I was 100% believer at that point, because I walked the jungle along that riverfront, and I never thought that we would have 500 people at 5 concerts each in the summertime, and that we would have a pavilion where people get married and they look out at the river, or that we have bathrooms down there that people can actually use, because it was literally poison ivy, briar patch. There were cars, there was an old safe, there was who knows what in those quarries. But because there was faith in the part of the town, and we followed a plan to invest and find a partner for that, which is the plan for this. We have to find a private partner to help us going forward. But no private partner is going to come in and invest the $750,000 plus the $300,000 to buy the property. They don't have it. That's not a good business decision. So these brownfield programs worked in East Hartford for Goodwin College, where there was an article that Lou Pear brought to us, and it showed that not only is there a college there now, but there's also a hotel that's planned, as well as some other living arrangements there on the river. And in Glastonbury, that was another tank farm that they turned into their community center and their boathouse and other opportunities for community and economic development. So I understand because I have to sit with the finance director every day, and I have to argue with the state of Connecticut that is not doing well, that hasn't planned its future, that told us we would get X number of dollars in January, and then in June they tell you a lower figure, and in September they tell you even lower. We need to take care of this town. And we have, I believe, a solid plan for redevelopment in this town. And that's what the selectmen are doing to follow. Now you, as very learned and very smart people, because I know most of you, you're giving us some good thoughts and some good questions tonight. But I hope that we work together to redevelop this riverfront. And this is a great opportunity for us, and I appreciate all the comments we're having. Elwyn, you had your hand on Cindy and Carrie. How long are you going to be?
I'm going to surprise you.
What I mean by that, and I should be a little more polite, is I want to make sure that other people have a chance to speak before they all have to go home and go to work in the morning. I'm sorry,
Last
Elwyn.
week, well, first off, I'm Elwyn Guile. I had the privilege of working with some incredible people on the Economic Development Commission in this town. Last week at our meeting, we had this picture posted on the wall. It was 10 years before this photograph that you see was taken. There was no riverfront park. There was no bandstand. There was no toilet facility. There was no picnic area. This road didn't exist. You couldn't come from Middlesex Avenue to the river. This incredibly successful park was absolutely empty. There was no operation by the Hayes brothers in those days. 10 years ago. Are we going to see something come down the road? I hope so. It's called an opportunity. It's not called a danger, it's an opportunity. Everyone who's worried about the what ifs, think about it for a second. What if? What if we go for this and we decide it's not something we really all want to pursue? We do know something about the value of that property that has been benefited from our taking an opportunity to invest and getting the support from the state to enrich that property. So for $300,000, you can sell it for $1 million. Bad deal, isn't it? Nothing ventured, nothing gained. We're talking about parking lots. We've already said a parking lot doesn't have to be this stretch of steaming asphalt. It can be a park space and still be a parking lot. If you have 100,000 people entertaining themselves in this space and there's no restaurant facility, imagine a restaurant that's located there. 500,000 people, if you got $5 a day, if you got $5 from each one of those 100,000 people, that's $500,000 just in raw revenue. Just to be crazy about it. The action we've had tonight, the engagement that you have presented, is just a reflection of a repetition that's been taking place here for years and years and years. I don't see all of you at every one of those, so welcome. But the reason you got the responses that are on the money is because all of this has been considered earlier. The one surprise tonight was Buckeye.
Yep.
That's the only one. Everything else has been thought through, hashed over. It's been through years of selectmen engagement, planning and zoning engagement, economic development commission engagement. We have a plan of conservation and development. There is the roadmap for, is there going to be something down the road? And it was created by the people of Portland, not by any one of these commissions. We spent $60,000 as a town to create a 10-year plan that says what? The top 3 things to accomplish for the future of this town are do something with Elmcrest that makes sense, create a town center, and fully develop the riverfront. I didn't say it. The town said it. It was done in one after another of major engagements of workshops where the townspeople, those who cared enough to come and share their view of what the future should be, there it was. The evidence is there. Look at the plan. And we're making tremendous progress. In just the 2 years since the plan of conservation and development was approved, we've seen final improvement on the Elmcrest development plan. This opportunity, which was brewing but not necessarily visible in full life, that's come to pass. The quarry operation with Exploration Park has been nothing but a positive for this town. $2,700,000 in revenue that you didn't have to pay in taxes for a hole that nobody knew what to do with. Too bad we didn't, years back, think about investing in the few bucks to buy the railroad right away, and we'd have the airline trail with bikes bringing more and more people right to that riverfront. I brought with me testimony from the Economic Development Commission. It has a full page of findings. That's the facts. Followed by 3 get it right, Ellen. Findings followed by 3 conclusions that are supported by those facts. And finally, 1 recommendation, and that's the only one I'm going to read. That recommendation is supported by those 3 conclusions. Easy for you to say.
Joke's on you.
It says, recommendation, this is the Economic Development Commission, encouraged Portland citizens to approve the purchase authorization so that the Board of Selectmen can move forward with the town's riverfront development. Thank you.
Thank you. Cindy?
Close the hearing.
Cindy Andrews, Stonegate Drive. My husband and I came with our 3 children to town in 1966, and we never made a smarter decision in our whole life. It was a fabulous place to bring up our kids. It had a great school system that for anybody who worked for the school, got it back. And my husband was one of a bunch of people who started looking at the riverfront years ago. I went along with it, and I have walked the riverfront. I have gone to the quarry and swum with my children and grandchildren, and I'm not poisoned, and I'm here. And that place, on a halfway decent day, if you're not there by 11 o'clock in the morning, you don't have a place. You don't have a spot, and they say, sorry, come back. I have also walked the riverfront park with a bunch of dogs over the years, and I have never been down there without passing, on the worst day, at least one other person, and usually a whole bunch of other people. This is not property that's not used. This is beautiful property. It's part of our town. It's part of all of us. And John Jarzak, I will bring you water. I will bring you water.
You ever been welcome?
No. Thank you, Cindy.
We have Carrie, and then we have Joyce. Carrie?
Just a couple of things. I'm wondering, is the property pretty level? Like, what is the elevation above the water? I know it's tidal, but like, say it when the tides are highest. I mean, how high from the, because I know over at the Riverfront Park, there's a pretty steep embankment.
Yeah, okay, so I'm not really sure about the question, but I can give you some information I think you're asking for. So DEP, when we got the grant, DEP wanted to meet with us and, talk about the plans for the remediation. So the coastal jurisdiction line is what they were most concerned about. Coastal jurisdiction line at this site at the river is 3 feet. And your land from the bank starts at a topographic level of 4 feet in elevation. So you're already a foot above the coastal jurisdiction line when you're seeing the land at the edge of the river, right?
The only other thing was just a comment, because I was sort of decided, but I hadn't quite made my mind up on the way here. And we were talking about it in the car on the way over. But just in listening to everybody, listening to the questions, listening to the answers tonight, I have decided that I'm going to vote in favor of this. I was kind of leaning that way anyway, but I really wanted to be sure. This is just such a great opportunity for the town. And while, we all get presented with opportunities in our lives here and there at different times, sometimes the timing isn't perfect, but sometimes you just have to move on something when it's there or it's going to be gone. And if we don't do this, we're going to lose this opportunity and just lose another opportunity to have access to the water.
Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you. Joyce?
Yes, I have a question.
Sure.
Joyce Backer, 15 Culver Lane, and also 265 Brownstone Avenue as the welding shop. I personally, and my husband, and a few other people who work on that street, I would like to know what the health hazards will be to us while you're moving all of this dirt.
Yep. So, again, state funded. We're getting the money from DECD, but I have to deal with DEP. I have to get approval of my plans. There is monitoring going on constantly, right? So I have a standard. I have machines around the perimeter, and they're always downwind of where we're working. And what they do is they pick up the particulates, and they tell me, doesn't decipher, bad dust, hazardous dust. It's saying any dust. And you get to this level and you stop. You stop the work. You have dust suppression. You're catching any runoff. But there's a full protocol. So not only do I, as a consultant overseeing the remediation contractor, have to have a health and safety plan that's done by a certified industrial hygienist, so does the contractor. They have to have their own health and safety plan. So all the I's got to be dotted and the T's got to be crossed for a project like this. The state doesn't give you money and then let you run rampant.
If I can ask a question, Joyce is a resident there, and there's also a few other residents within
Yep.
the area. Can we do resident notification on days that there'll be remediation activity?
So as part of the grant, there's always public outreach, right? Yes, absolutely. We have to notify not only the public, absolutely we are working with the residents to say, this is where we're going to be doing, this work on this day. These are the trucks, here's how they'll be exiting. I mean, it's a full plan. It has to be communicated. All of this has to be done with public notices and, I have to address your concerns.
And this is also going to be going on while the Discovery Park is going to be doing their thing.
So, I don't want to do that. Let me tell you. I don't want to do the remediation on Middletown's waterfront while Wesleyan and Middletown High School and Cho and Xavier are running their regattas, right? I'm planning around him. I don't want to deal with any of, the 5,000 cars that are along the road. I'm going off season. That's my plan. It's better for me. It's cheaper too. You put it out to bid and the contractor wants the work in the slow time, the winter. It's cheaper.
Sean?
At the risk of being shot here, he's here. The guy lining his pocket, who I haven't seen that heavy pocket yet. Look, if anyone knows me, I am for smaller government. This is not something I, as a business executive, would endorse in any way, form, or fashion. The only reason it gets my endorsement is because of the brownfield grant. Because as a business, no business out there, as a developer, can put this package together in a viable business sense. Because if it was South Miami Beach, or LA, or California, on beautiful, pristine beach, $1 million tomorrow morning, I'm in. Look at your neighbors. With disrespect to our neighbors. But you have a liquid asphalt plant next door. Okay? You're not getting the viable property values in this market today. It is going to take a redevelopment plan that only the town can implement. I mean, now, when you talk about the economics, Ben brought up some good questions. But the reality is, if you look and go to the previous map that separates and gives you the contamination, okay, those two more southern lots, quote unquote, the simple parking lots, very simply, you can take all that clean fill, okay, out of those two lots, move it to the northern lot, and put all the contaminants in the two lots. Opposite, I think, what Ben was thinking in his head, because the reality is, those two lots are next to a liquid asphalt plant. What more can you put up against? What business? A restaurant is not going up against a liquid asphalt. I don't know, anyone been there midsummer? They are closed, but again, it is going to be an eyesore for 10 years. There's a long-term lease on that property, and the leasee has no intention of releasing the lease because he doesn't want competition in the market, as I understand it. Okay? So, again, a viable, everyone looks at the parking lot as, is that a viable return? I'm going to go back to a couple of numbers. $2.8 million brownstone park has contributed to the town for its lease. The only way, and a part of that lease, is to provide us viable parking. Anyone that lives on that street knows we do not have viable parking for this solution. Okay? So move-in parking, and as simple as a parking solution that is the least costly improvement to that property, increases the tax basis to the town of Portland instantaneously, because it becomes more viable. Anyone that knows my business knows that it's gone down over the last year. Why? Because of the liquid asphalt plant and other contributing factors. So it is hurting business. Okay? But, you know, again, the solution can take on many forms, but the reality is, as a viable product going forward, whatever the town decides to do with the property, you know, I think a redevelopment plan with the brownstone or brownfield grants are the only solution here, especially for where our adjacent market in industrial complex and industrial road can mandate in today's market. No. Not big pockets here, guys. I mean,
Mary was just gonna.
And I just want to clarify what he's referring to with the liquid asphalt plant is Bitumar, which is on the very bottom, it's that white building that you see to the bottom of the last of the yellow lines. And they are closing, and the reason they are closing is when the heating oil is no longer being brought up on the river by barge, they stop dredging the river. So the river used to be, when the permit was issued for the dolphin pilings in 1956, the water was 30 feet deep in the channel. They can't get 17 feet in some spaces now. So that's, if anyone is wondering why they're closing, that's the reason they're closing, is the barges cannot come up the river anymore. So that means that everything that they do has to be on a truck on the roadway. And it's just made it that much more expensive, and they have an existing plant in Rhode Island. But they are sitting on the lease because the parcel is there, and they could use it for the same purpose, and that would be competition for them in Connecticut. So they're protecting their market. So the smell this summer will be gone, because the production won't be there, but it's going to look the same. So what I would love to do is, yeah.
Pipeline runs down there, that's how the fuel gets there, not by barge. Petroleum pipeline.
But that's not what they use for Bitumar. Bitumar is a different, I know what you're talking about, but that's why they stopped dredging the channel, is because they stopped using the barges for home heating oil. So that smell that's created during manufacturing will not be there. So your smell in your neighborhood will be better. The view on that property will be the same.
We've had a full night, I would say. It's been an outstanding public hearing for our selectmen who are scattered throughout the room. Any other comments tonight? Yes, Bob?
Just a quick comment. Thank you very much. This has been very informative. We've had a lot of good presentations, resources, answers, and the questions have been good. My one disappointment is that I think this has become a crisis. We have 7 days now to take this information, do our homework, and then vote. And then we've got the big unknown. I don't look at this as a $385,000 issue. I look at this as a big, deep hole. $750,000 times what? What's really out there? So, but thank you.
Thank you. The process, unless the selectmen change it, the process is next Wednesday, which is 28th of February, there will be a town meeting in this room, and it has to be in this room because that's the way it's been noticed. And Bruce Chudwick had informed me of that. Should there be too many people, our alternate site would be the senior center, which is right around the bend here. So if there are too many people and we're not allowed to be in here, we would put a sign, we'd all walk over together, and hopefully those that come a little bit later would read the sign and join us. And we would wait until the proper time. We have to do all these things as open as possible. given the way that we conduct our meetings.
Sue?
Yeah, yes.
I don't want to drag this thing out any
No.
longer. Bill Petzold, Gospel Lane, Portland. But the last two speakers brought up some very good points. And I too do not like this thing being rammed down my throat in just a 1 week period.
Okay.
The other thing is that to me, as a business person, you would think the negotiations for some time with the Discovery Park people. That's the natural thing. I would think across the street, they need parking and stuff.
Right.
And have that all lined up if they're interested. That's where I would have gone right off the bat, and then clean the property up and make a deal with them. You know what? And
Right.
make a deal with them so that you know the numbers ahead of time.
Good points, and I want to just clarify again, we have nothing that we can do with this property unless we own it.
Now, I
When we
understand, but
started,
can't you make a deal pending upon completion of the cleanup?
we have been in talks. I can't publicly start saying what the content of those talks were. It was somewhat the previous Board of Selectmen and the current Board of Selectmen that were elected in November. We're continuing that conversation. So yes, and there had been, I can't divulge the details, but there has been serious discussions, and there is a draft. Based on what I'll converse, I can tell more, but it's just, I'm very careful, Bill, that I protect the town, and I don't commit something that I can't. But we have been in discussions. Would you acknowledge that, Mr. Hayes?
Yes, I mean, we've had numerous conversations, but again, it's not a simple matter. You know, for us, you know, we're halfway through a short-term lease. As you know, as a business owner, to invest CapEx, you know, to get a return on CapEx, everyone thinks, you know, again, lining the pockets, to use somebody's saying. Yeah.
Was that yours, Mr. Jarlsberg?
Okay. But, you know, it takes a long time to return on capital. So an investment of any type requires a long-term vision and goal. Right now, we don't have a long-term lease. We have a 25-year lease. We're 12 years into that lease.
Right.
To-
But we have had
So
you are right, you
It's
have.
a part of a longer-term lease extension
Right.
that could occur, and we've had those initial discussions, we've had an initial draft, so yes, it's part of the big picture.
Yes.
Have we gone down and decided, you know, again, I think you're absolutely right. A development plan, before you start remediation, is all a part of this, and no, we haven't gotten that far.
In
But-
my point would that would have been step one. But step two is, I'm 99% of the time not in favor of town buying property. The worst people for development is the town, because they will never do it. You get a private developer somewhere, he's gonna do something with it, and you're gonna get a lot of tax money. But the town, I guarantee if I'm still around in 10 years and you've got the property, that's gonna be a nice looking all place for the people to Portland to walk around with a nice little park. There's gonna be no tax income coming from it, just like all the other places that we've been
That's
developing.
not the plan.
A town is not in the business of developing property. If you've got a good developer in there, I would say, man, you do it, and let him do whatever you wanna do with it.
And that is,
I don't see the town buying that.
but that is the plan. And that was the plan for the quarries, and that's what we've done. And that's how we have gotten
Well,
a
you got two things
successful
here.
business.
We blew the first, which is, I think, was the best program, at Elmcrest. That guy had a really good program for that property. Unfortunately, making it 3 or 4 years for him to get all his papers working in order, and then the economy was the heck.
I know.
Okay, so now you've got a plan that I don't think is that great to begin with, but maybe it's gonna work out all right and stuff. But they have, you know, well, we need a lot more retail and that sort of stuff, and not that high-rise stuff like that, but I'm getting off the track of this thing. But bottom line is, I think there's a lot better things you can do and not be, you know, jumping into this thing, I think.
But we can't, and I just want to reiterate,
I understand,
we
but what
can
happened
sell
the
it.
last 3 years? I mean,
But if that's the plan that the town wants us to do, then the town will vote and they can resell the property. But it's sat there for 10 years and it's degrading the property values that are there now. I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. What I'm saying is, you have the opportunity to turn this around. And if you're.
Maybe, but look at your neighbors down there, unfortunately. I mean, you're avoiding all these the lower end down here, I mean, it's not the great, at some point it is, maybe, if we get all that out of there, but right
Well,
now, it's not a
Middletown and some of the examples that we used in terms of riverfront property, Glastonbury's tank farm was pretty ugly back in the day. And East Hartford's, and the other parcel that I'm not quite as familiar with, other than just driving by, is the sewer plant in Middletown. That's being converted to a riverfront operation.
The
That's
problem is
going
you
to be
have developers, you have the towns that go into these places, starting with Hartford, waterfront, Glastonbury, Middletown is just, do they have any, on all these places that bring in any money in from the boaters and that
We
stuff?
do.
What, I mean, you're gonna put in slips down there and all kinds of stuff to bring in stuff? And same with Hartford, you know, there's all kinds of boaters, they could bring thousands of boaters up the river to Hartford, but you can't, you don't have a single place to tie up.
Sure.
You can't use, now, Glastonbury doesn't use their property, their beautiful waterfront property, for all their rowing teams, and they've got, I don't know, probably 1,000 kids in their rowing teams.
Right.
But they've got this great waterfront property, and they've eliminated an awful lot of stuff on it. So it doesn't, you know, the benefit isn't always there. But if it was private property, there'd be somebody that would be doing something to make a buck. And you'd be getting taxed.
Nobody's gonna make 750 plus.
Okay. Any other comments? If not, we'll close the public hearing, and we're going to be convening a Board of Selectmen meeting. So you can stay if you'd like to hear the Board of Selectmen.
Even I'm going on
Thank
that
you.
one.
Okay.